What is the estimated percentage of positive drug recommendations given by the CDR? Excellent. You've all done your homework. 50%, and 50% is the correct answer. The latest data that we have actually shows that essentially out of the 149 submissions up till February, only 73 have received a positive recommendation, which really, when you look at it, is basically a flip of a coin, 50%. And we talk about trying to attract investment here in Canada. 50% doesn't give a lot of predictability in terms of convincing our shareholders that Canada is a great place to invest. The next few slides are from a Wyatt survey, and I think Russell Williams alluded to it. This was an RX&D report that really looked at how Canada does compare with the rest of the markets. Very clearly, we rank 20th out of the 25 countries in terms of reimbursement, and essentially when you look at those common drugs, CDR recommended 56% of them, which is far less than the 74% average. And then when you take that positive recommendation, we find that the public plans actually only list even a fewer percentage, and that's 52%. When you look at the biologic set of drugs, the numbers are actually even worse, if you will. From a Canadian perspective, only 35% received a positive recommendation, when 75% is the average. And you can see there that about 9 to 10 countries are well over 90%. These are countries that obviously that compare very closely to the Canadian marketplace. Translated into what then the public payers will do. So even with a positive recommendation, what you find is there's still high provincial variation in terms of what they do with that recommendation, that most listings are with criteria, so they're not a general benefit listing, that as well that there are significant differences as well by disease area. So irrespective of the 56% of the drugs that get a positive recommendation, if you look at diabetes as an example versus the rest of the world, that would only be 27%, or schizophrenia as an example would be 45% versus 90%. So you can see that it really depends on the area, but in general the listing favorability continues to decline even at the payer decision level. The Common Drug Review was established in 2003, and I don't plan to go through the process here, but essentially to say that it covers all provinces with the exception of Quebec. And needless to say, Quebec does offer the best reimbursement or listing probability compared to the others. So the question is why is that different? I think if you just ask industry and my feedback from my colleagues as well, this is a quick summary of the CDR process and sort of a report card, if you will, in terms of our view. And that is, obviously, we've covered the fact that there's a high rejection for the innovative drugs compared to the rest of the world. And that leads to a barrier to access for patients. About 50% of patients rely on those public plans for access. That there is an inconsistent application of the yes. So the yes definitely doesn't mean yes, it may mean maybe. And even when there is a yes, the fact that it may be an effective no in terms of the way the criteria is listed. That it does negatively impact. The CDR recommendation, although is focused on the public player, it may actually negatively impact what the private payers will do or what the prescription behavior of a physician will be. The fact that some of these decisions are made in isolation, and that there's general dissatisfaction with the entire process. So my offer up of a couple of solutions speak to the fact that there's an improvement, there should be an improvement in the transparency in the way decisions are made, that there should be better engagement of the public and patients, and that maybe there's an opportunity to look at the review of the criteria and the reimbursement process. And so I don't plan to go through all the different comments that are on these slides. They're available for your review. But essentially the fact that the deliberation is taking place in private and that the recommendations aren't always clear, there's an opportunity to look at best practices in other parts of the world in terms of having public forums for these opportunities for deliberation and for discussion. And the fact that we should have freedom of information in terms of the way these decisions are being made. The consideration of different councils, whether that be industry or patient councils, and to have really a more transparent and open decision process. I think that would be one of the opportunities in terms of improvement. The second is these products actually and these decisions impact the patients, the people that should have access to the products. And the fact that there really is no meaningful engagement, that the public opinions aren't necessarily valued, need to be considered. If you look at the examples of NICE as an example in the UK and in Scotland or even in Germany, patient testimonials, patient input to the process is really, really critical. So to ensure that that happens, we should have a formalized process of having these patient interactions. having disease organizations, patient organizations have input to the process and have a decision. And last but not least, to also include patient outcomes as a viable part of the decision criteria. And the third and final sort of recommendation, we'll look at the review criteria process. We talked about it being narrow in its review, that we should have a broader societal or value-based decision process. And the fact that some of our rare diseases and orphan drugs are not really considered as part of the process. So how should they be? There's obviously ethical considerations as well with that. And there's great examples from across the globe on how they actually, how other countries and jurisdictions actually view these. I think one of the opportunities is for CDR, as opposed to saying it's yes or no, is to really define the place in therapy. And I think that would be very specific and helpful to payers in terms of making decisions, to look at other surrogate and other decision points outside of randomized controlled trials in terms of making these decisions. And as well to ensure that we don't just look at the silo approach, that we look at the full healthcare model as other jurisdictions do. So in summary, the Canadian market is an attractive place, and it's our job to find those solutions to these challenges. I think I've tried to highlight the fact that we do have a complex reimbursement system, that there are disadvantages depending on the disease state and variations depending on the provinces as well, and that the provincial programs continue to be in a state of flux. The future trends, as hopefully we've alluded to, is the fact that the private payer market is a thriving and growing segment. But needless to say, with economics as a key consideration, will they become more public-like in the future? And I think that's one of our other future challenges. And last but not least, the fact that out-of-pocket payments from consumers and patients account for about 20% of the spend, so they will continue to play a much greater role in the decisions of reimbursement and access as we move forward. Thank you.